Well, soon after he was elected Prime Minister Narendra Modi, I met him with a group of journalists at a reception. And at that point, he had just announced that his first state visit would be Bhutan. So we asked, why Bhutan? It's a relatively small country, though, of course, a very close friend of India. And he said, at that point, he said, it is a matter of not just our general policy in India, but it is a matter of personal concern to me as a Prime Minister and as a person that our neighborhood countries, many of whom he had visited even before he was Prime Minister, a lot of them disliked or distrusted India. And he said, in my view, this is in many ways my first point of agenda, that we must turn this around, that the countries that are closest to us, culturally and otherwise, should dislike us so much, is something that I wish to turn around. Second, in a different context, I had met him with another group of strategic thinkers, and we had discussed broader foreign policy issues. And at one point, when we mentioned the priorities of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, who also had a neighborhood first policy, he said, I don't have a problem with what my predecessor's policies were. My concern is implementation. He never implemented many of the things that he said he would. And at the heart of that, more than any other country, was Bangladesh. Not only because Bangladesh is the biggest of our neighbors other than Pakistan and China. It is a country that is crucial to our stability of the Northeast, to our control of the Bay of Bengal, where we see as a major point of contestation with China in the future. And finally, crucial to our own national security, because it had become a major point where Pakistani terrorism was using that as a base, as a safe haven against India. And as you may remember, the failure of UPA-2 was the land border agreement. And Modi's first foreign policy, just action, concrete action in the neighborhood, was to be able to get the land border agreement through, which his predecessor had failed. And Bangladesh, I think he would still see as his number one success in foreign policy. Our relationship with Bangladesh is completely different from what it was even 10 years ago. It is a transformed relationship. He has had a harder time with Sri Lanka, partly because of the internal squabbles among the Sri Lankan leaders, but also because of a growing interference of China. And Maldives, we saw that in remarkably strong point. And this is going to be the new challenge in our neighborhood policy. And I think that's one of the reasons why within our Indian system we have pushed neighborhood policy to a much higher level, is that we are increasingly seeing a lot of Chinese presence and Chinese interference in local politics in our neighborhood. Pakistan used to interfere, but Pakistani interference was negligible and was only focused on supporting terrorism. Chinese interference is much more and much more about capturing the entire structure of a government.
Do you think that China's rise has an impact on the Indian relationship with her neighbors?
Yes.
To what extent?
I think that the crucial change has been that China, more so than any other country, previous countries that have intervened in our neighborhood have been the United States during the Cold War, and as I mentioned, Pakistan. Pakistan was only focused on promoting terrorism and instability. They were incapable of actually being able to act as an example or capture a government, if you wish. The United States was focused only on fighting the Soviet Union. And to a little extent supporting Pakistan against us. But since the 1990s, that policy is more or less dead. And in fact, America is now one of our strongest supporters for our neighborhood policy. As a U.S. diplomat told me a few years ago, he says, as far as your neighborhood is concerned, we are prepared to let you take the lead and we shall follow. And wherever you want us to support you, we will. But China is very different. China's position has been, one, we will use Pakistan to act as a means to contain India. Now China's view is that the Indian Ocean, its own version of the Indo-Pacific policy, as Chinese Navy chief has said, the Indian Ocean cannot be India's ocean. Therefore, as American power withdraws from the Indian Ocean, China believes that it is its natural position that it must move into that space. And as part of that, it has been trying to capture or develop control or dominant control of governments which are strategically important in the Indian Ocean. So we mentioned the Maldives, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, also Djibouti, Kenya, Tanzania. And so now this is a much bigger challenge, something we've never had to
Do you
really
think
worry
that
about.
the changing situation in Sri Lanka and Maldives will have impact on India's relations with these two neighbors?
Traditionally, what we have tried to do in these smaller countries is that both the opposition and the ruling party in each country, all of the major political players, should adopt India, see India as their primary strategic and economic partner. And we've been moving, for example, just after the Sri Lankan Civil War, I remember the then National Security Advisor, Shiv Shankar Menon's, telling us that what an excellent situation where both the Tamils, the Buddhists, both the two major political parties in Sri Lanka see India as their primary partner. In the Maldives, we had Nasheed, we had Gayoom, both of them saying that India is our first partner. China's entry has meant now that there is always a third force. Or one of the opposition can now turn to China and say, will you support us against India? So our initial, that short period, we had a situation where we were in a very strong position, has now been, should we say, undermined. So Yamin has came out of nowhere in the Maldives, completely based on Chinese money. Rajapaksa then turned against us for the same reason, Chinese money. And in each case, we have seen the Chinese deliberately convert a stakeholder, a major political player in that country, to an anti-India position. We haven't yet seen that in Bangladesh. We've been lucky there, but we are seeing that in Nepal.
Now, I would like to take up India's relations with Pakistan. We have, problems right as partition.
Correct.
And there have been so many attempts, right from Nehru to Modi, to defend Pakistan. We have tried track 1, we have tried track 2. Now, which track do you suggest to handle Pakistan?
So as you know, the closest we have come in recent times to a complete understanding with Pakistan was in the latter years of the Musharraf government. Musharraf concluded over a period of time, because remember he was elected as a violent opponent of India, a man who publicly said to his army officers that even if we resolve Kashmir, India will remain our number one enemy. But by the end of his term in office, he was doing the track 2 diplomatic exchange led by Ambassador S.K. Lamba on our side, trying to come to an understanding with us. And his only argument was that you must make not even a territorial concession, just a political concession to the people of Indian Kashmir, the Indian side of Kashmir, so that I can claim that I have accomplished something and I will go back to my people.
I think it was the same thing when Bhutto came here and he almost begged Mrs. Gandhi that how I shall go back and what face I will show to the people. So here I think Musharraf was also the same problem.
Same problem, but as you know, Musharraf fell from power. Soon afterwards, we were never able to conclude the agreement. His successor, General Kayani, opposed the agreements or the understanding we had with Musharraf, and we saw a lot of that policy retreat. At the heart of it was a Pakistani view that Musharraf concluded that the future between India and Pakistan was one where Pakistan would continue to fall behind. As one of his aides supposedly told an Indian counterpart, either we come to an agreement with you now, or we will be like Mexico demanding California back from the United States 20 years from now. So better we do it now when we are at least some strength. The view now, I would argue under Kayani and others, that no, India actually is not as strong as it is, and now Pakistan has a new friend, and that's China. The arrival of the disappearance of American power, but the arrival of China, and we talked to Pakistan, is very clear. China is now our number one friend. 70% of their weapons come from China. It is their primary source of economic support. The giant China-Pakistan economic corridor is seen as a means to revive and rebuild the Pakistani economy. But one consequence is that they are now completely dependent upon China for almost everything. And what we have discovered, I would argue, when I've talked to senior Indian diplomats over the past few years, they have said increasingly we find that when we have a problem with Pakistan, we have to phone Beijing, not Islamabad. Pakistan, as one of our former foreign secretaries told me, is now a subset of our China policy. Because China's control is extraordinary, much stronger than the United States was. The Americans were never really focused in the way that the Chinese are. And Pakistan is a neighbor of China. The United States is very far away. And America had, many other interests. China has this very clear one. Pakistan and North Korea are their two closest friends. There are no other countries close to them.
Two extremes.
Exactly. But so the game now for us, which makes it a lot more difficult to some extent, is that we have to manipulate our China policy and bring in Pakistan as a subset of this. But it can work both ways. While China is determined to support Pakistan in almost every way, so for example, their opposition to us joining the nuclear suppliers group is not about India. It is that if we allow you in, Pakistan cannot get entry because none of the other NSG members will allow Pakistan in. So the two of you have to go together. But India says, we can't do that. China says, well, in that case, nobody can do it.
There's a diplomatic issue.
Yeah, so they've hyphenated us very strongly in the multilateral sphere. The flip side, though, is China is increasingly nervous about Pakistan's internal stability. They, as you know, have put 1 million Muslims, of their own Muslims, in camps. They are determined to stop any Islamic terrorism inside their own country, are nervous about the stability of Pakistan. So one of the reasons they have come to us and said, why don't you support the Belt Road Initiative? Because it will help stabilize Pakistan. And we are worried about the stability of Pakistan. So that gives us a certain amount of leverage. And that is one of the reasons you'll notice that in the past 4.5 years, we have had no major terrorist attack sponsored by Pakistan on Indian soil. And our understanding is that one of the reasons for that, not the only reason, is that China has said no. We cannot build, have told Islamabad, we cannot build the China-Pakistan economic corridor if you and India are fighting.
Certainly.
And we have now perhaps somewhere between 20 to 25,000 Chinese living inside Pakistan who are hostages to such a conflict. So the Chinese increasingly are telling Pakistan, we will support you, but we will not support violent action against Pakistan. The only area we will allow is limited line of control sparring, but no terrorism, because terrorism is something that will affect us as well. So it works sometimes to our benefit. But let's fully understand that push comes to shove, China will support Pakistan. And now our Pakistan policy, as I've said, is now a subset of our China policy.